all who have served our country in any way that they did it. My father, who recently passed, he was in the Air Force, and he was a teacher. He never really saw any action per se, but he taught a lot, and he taught, I believe, a lot of the engineers that ended up working on the planes and things of that sort. He was in the Air Force, and I'm very proud. And my other two fathers were in the Navy, so there you go. And Ronnie, I know, I honor you. And anybody, is there anybody, I know, Smitty, anybody else here that's done service in our congregation today, or have family that was in service? Yes, thank you. Just thank you.
Well, I was in Honolulu during the Vietnam War.
Well, there you go.
I did my part.
But you weren't there during Pearl Harbor, thank God.
No, I've never been able. All the time I spent in Hawaii, I've never been able to make it out there.
No. So we're very grateful that we have our Smitty here today to speak to us and bring us a great message of what's going on with, why the devil want my prayers answered. So let's all welcome Keith Smyth. Thank you.
Do we need the lights off?
No, I'm not sure what's happened. It should be
It needs the lights on.
Oh, because it's,
Shuts itself off.
Does
it has a timer on it.
There it is.
Yeah, there it is. I have a short video that I want to. I have a short video that I want to play that shows exactly how our brains lie to us and how programmed we really are. Now this thing has audio, so what I'm going to have to do is use the mic for my little speaker here. And let's get this thing started here. First, we put the eyeballs in.
Everything in order, yeah, that's right.
Okay, is that thing up?
Yes, sir.
Okay. This is called the Ames window.
Even though your brain is more remarkable than the most powerful computer in the world, it is possible to trick that very brain of yours. Have a look at this. What can you see? Oh, you say that's easy. I can see a window going around. Is it rotating or no? It paused. Now it's going the other way. Okay, so we're watching a window that's going backwards and forwards. Pauses again. Now it goes back the other way. Backwards and forwards all the time, oscillating. Are you sure that's what you're seeing? In fact, you're looking at an optical illusion that was invented by Albert Ames back in 1951, and it's quite a remarkable illusion. If we stop the window now, you notice that it was rotating the same direction all the time on a turntable, same way all the time, but it isn't a rectangle. You assumed that it was a window, so it must be a rectangle. Oh, no, it isn't. Look at that end there, quite short. This end, quite large. In fact, it's a trapezoid. A trapezoid, a strange shape. Not a rectangle, though. But because we've seen so many windows in our lives, we assume that they're all rectangular. Let's have a look at a real window. Your brain was forced to make a choice in that illusion between seeing a rectangular window going backwards and forwards or a trapezoid rotating. And you chose the rectangular window. You knew that when you look at a rectangular window that has cross pieces, you can see not only the fronts of those cross pieces, but also the sides. You may even see shadows underneath some of the cross pieces. But you've seen so many of these windows that you know all the time they'll be rectangular. And you can see that I've painted this window on a flat piece of cardboard to look like a real window. In fact, I've painted the cross pieces so that they appear to be three-dimensional. I've even painted in the shadows that you might get if you had a light from above. Okay, now you know it's an illusion. You know it's not a window, it's a flat piece of cardboard. You also know that it's a trapezoid, it's not a rectangle. So now the illusion won't work with you, will it? Or will it? Have a look at it again. Well, this really is quite crazy, isn't it? We know all about the illusion now. It shouldn't work on us, and yet it still does. We still see the window going backwards and forwards. Look at that. It's appearing to pause now, and now change direction and go back the other way. Even though we know, because we've seen it on the turntable, we know that it's rotating in the same direction all the time. Well, I think the problem is we don't have a reference point. What we need to do is to attach something to the window, so we'll stop it now and attach a matchbox to one end. We'll attach it to the short end here with a paper clip. And then all you need to do is to watch that matchbox and use that as your point of reference. So this time the illusion won't trick you, or will it? Watch this. Now there's the matchbox going around the back of the window. Keep watching it. Now look what happens. The window appears to pause and go backwards, but the matchbox keeps coming and floats out past this edge of the window and rejoins the other edge of the window. Watch it again. Goes around the back. Firmly attached to the window, you can see that. But here's the crazy part. The window appears to stop, to pause and then go backwards, but the matchbox just keeps on coming, floating through space. I think maybe the problem is we have our reference point attached to the window. Let's stop it. Take the matchbox off, and this time put on a reference point through the centre of the window. What I'll use is a ruler, wooden ruler, can't bend, and I'll attach it right to the centre of the window in this position here. Now this time you watch the ruler. You know it can't bend, so this time I'm sure we will defeat the illusion. What do you think? Here we
Watch
go.
this.
Now there's the window, rotating. So is the ruler. It's attached to the window. But what's happening here? The window's going backwards, the ruler's still coming, and now it goes somehow or other through the window itself. Really crazy. The window pauses again, ruler keeps coming. Ruler's attached to the window, you can see that, you can even see the pin. But watch what happens here. Ruler's coming, window pauses, window goes backwards, and somehow or other they go through each other, even though you know they can't do it. What a crazy illusion Adalbert Ames invented. Isn't that remarkable? You know, you can make one yourself, simply with a piece of cardboard, small piece of cardboard, which you'll paint to give that same sort of shadowy effect, so it looks three-dimensional. Do it the same each side, and then attach a pin to it. Get a friend to hold it some distance away from you like that. Close one eye, or look through a hole in a piece of cardboard and get your friend to rotate it. You'll find that very same illusion. You know why it works with all of us? Because we're so used to seeing windows which are rectangular. If the same illusion is taken to a tribe in the middle of Africa where they haven't seen rectangular windows, it doesn't work for them. They see it rotating around and around and around, whereas we see it going backwards and forwards all the time.
Okay, that's what I wanted to point out. We are programmed. You have two sets of beliefs. I know everybody says, oh yeah, positive and negative. I wish it were that simple. Can we have some light? You have two sets of belief. You have the beliefs you know about and the ones you don't. And here today is what we're going to talk about, are the ones that you don't have. Let me get this thing set up the rest of the way. Come on, computer, work. It's about as old as I am, and it's about as slow as I am
We still have
anymore.
a week before Mercury goes into retrograde, so you're okay there.
When does it go?
Next Saturday.
So it's not into retrograde yet?
Not
What
yet.
what do we?
It's the build-up.
We're in the shadows, so
In the
yes,
shadows,
it's
yeah.
still, it's affecting us now.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That affects me even when it's,
When it's not.
exactly.
Oh,
But
you
I do
can-
believe that.
You can blame it on Mercury,
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's easy.
regardless of where Mercury is.
And I got
There
a
we
lot of
There you go.
Mercury.
That's
Okay.
Virgo and Gemini.
A lot of times when I'm working with this stuff, and we start talking about the beliefs that are buried inside. You see, when you make a prayer, the prayer doesn't go from the conscious mind straight up to God, or your high self, or spirit guide, or whatever you want to call it, guardian angel. It has to go through your filter system of whether or not you deserve what you're asking for. That's in your subconscious. That's where your belief systems are. Now, if your subconscious has been programmed from when you were a child on to believe that you don't deserve what you're asking for, it won't pass the prayer up. And every time I start this, people ask, well, what do we do about that crap? How about that?
Flush it. Yeah. Woo.
That's where that crap belongs. Now, how do we get it there? That's the trick. You see, in the course of our lives, we've set up what's called the wall of meaning. This is the wall that's got all of our beliefs on them, the positive ones and the non-beneficial ones. These non-beneficial ones are written on your wall all over. Now, the positive ones we want to keep, but these non-beneficial ones, every time you run into one of them, when you're in a course of doing something and something happens, it will remind you of a situation back in your previous life. That's why I put out this 10 things to think about on your chairs. The first thing, item number 1, what happened to me in the past is not happening now. Okay, that's it, I'm done. Yes, CJ.
Is past lives involved in this?
What happened to you in the past is not happening now.
Okay.
All of the past. And by the way, that past life is not a past life. It's a parallel life. It's happening now. Anyway, read all of these through because these things really make a big difference. Life changes from moment to moment, and so can I. I can fight and win the battles of today only. You can't go back and re-win battles you lost when you were a kid. Believe me, I know. I got beat up constantly in school because I was the smallest kid in school and also one of the mouthiest. But the thing is once I got some size on me, I could fight back. Then they jumped me with 2 carloads instead of 1. And that had happened. Okay, to go into these belief systems, when a situation happens today that is going on and reminds your subconscious of something that happened to you when you were a child, a very traumatic or just something that really irritated you, and you made a decision about that as a child, 5 or a 6-year-old, that this is what you were going to do if this ever happened to you again. And here it is, you're in your 30s, 50s, 60s, or whatever, and it's happening again. You revert to that 6-year-old. All of that emotion comes forward and slaps you upside the head, and you react like the child. What we do is use a pendulum or meditation and go back when the situation hits. We look at it and say, wait a minute, where did this anger, upset come from? And we go back. We start looking back. We'll see all the different trails because these manifestations are all from that core issue back when you were a child. Once you get back to that, you can deal with the subconscious and say, yeah, but we were a child. It really wasn't beneficial to us to stick that wire into that electric socket, and we got slapped for it, especially when it knocked us clear across the room for doing it. We really ought not do that anymore.
Really?
So we can negotiate with the subconscious to drop the emotion. Keep the memory. The memory is beneficial. The emotion is what's getting you. So now as you deal with that emotion and start eliminating it, what will happen is the tyrants will show up. These are your tyrants. They're a projection. They're a part of you that is the habit of that reaction occurring when that situation happens. Boy, are you habitual. Oh, by the way, let me ask you a question. How many of you believe in the law of attraction? Raise your hand.
Sure.
Good. Now, This next question, when you raise your hand, I want you to keep your hand up and then look around the room. How many of you can make it work reliably? Good, get up here, Ann, I want to know how.
Whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong, it's still, it is, right?
Oh boy, oh boy, we got our work cut out for us.
Yeah, we do.
This is why the law of attraction doesn't work. You have a block that's preventing you from getting what it is you're asking for, and that block is in the subconscious. You see, I teach dowsing. Dowsing is nothing more than getting questions answered by the subconscious. Prayers are nothing more than getting questions passed through the subconscious to the higher being. It's no different than dowsing. If your dowsing ain't working, your prayers probably aren't working, and the vice is also the versa. Okay, so what do we do about all of this? Well, you can lead them to it, but you can't make them do it. The time and time again, I have worked with people. I've talked and talked and talked until I'm blue in the face, just like I'm doing right now. If you don't do the processes, I can't hold a gun to your head and force you to do it. Well, I could, but I couldn't force you. If you won't do the process of using the pendulum or doing the meditation, none of this is going to help. Here is where you bottle up your emotions. If when something happens to you, instead of dealing with the emotion or just watching the emotion run, this is the trick. When the emotion runs and you go looking back at the same time the emotion is running, you'll usually get an image in your mind of when that occurred as a child. If you'll stand aside instead of reacting to the emotion. You see, the emotion is only there to tell you that something has happened. What you do about it is what's going to bite you in the tailbone. Invariably. And that's what it will do. And we all wear masks. These are the three masks of humanity. The first mask is who we want. This is our public mask. This is who we want people to believe and see who we are. Except this is fake. We wear this mask to be accepted. Because right behind that mask is the mask of who we're afraid we are, which is totally unacceptable. And behind that is the real mask of who you really are, which is perfection. You see, you are nothing more than love. You're nothing more than the expression of God experiencing physical life. And I know this is going to sound funny, but you're not out there. I'm not up here. There's only one. There's only the one. Each one of us sitting here is ourselves in a past incarnation, in a different incarnation, being who we all are in all our different guises. We're all the same, way down deep, at the subatomic level. How about a lift? The more you get into this metaphysics and start learning about how to deal with your subconscious, oh, by the way, it really does help to make a friend out of your subconscious. Because if you do, you'll have the most powerful friend in the world. Because the subconscious mind is 30,000 times stronger than the conscious mind. You see, the conscious mind is totally, completely, and utterly helpless by itself. You don't believe that? I don't know how to walk. Teach me how to walk. I don't know how to pick up a cup of coffee. Teach me how to pick up the cup. Gee, it's awfully quiet in here. The conscious mind can do nothing. The subconscious mind beats the heart, pumps the blood, operates the lungs, pulling the oxygen out of the air and putting it in the blood, changing food into energy, getting rid of wastes. And by the way, when it comes time to walk, it knows which muscle to contract and which one to expand in a leg to cause us to fall forward. And by the way, we walk by falling. Oh, we're something else. The conscious mind can do none of this. It can only think. It can't even speak without the subconscious mind's cooperation to operate the vocal cords. Thank God I made a friend of mine or I wouldn't be up here talking.
That's right.
Now here's the problem a lot of people have, and Mel can speak to this. Booze and drugs won't cut the chains.
No.
The chains of the angers and the upsets and all of that thing that you refuse to deal with. You're turning to drugs and alcohol as the crutch. And it's a rubber crutch. Ah, yes, abdicated responsibilities. Far too many people will turn over the entirety of their lives to their spirit guide or their high self, up to including choosing their shoelaces. And about the time you do this, they're going to drop an anvil on your head called abdicated responsibilities, because we're here to learn how to deal with all of this stuff consciously. We're here to evolve. The conscious mind is learning to evolve into a high self. The subconscious mind is learning to evolve into the middle self, or the conscious mind. I learned this on the other side when I was dead at the age of 14. So this is a review for me. But when I forgot what all of this was about and tried to turn all of my life over to God and wait until I got directions on what to do, my life turned to holy crap, quite frankly. Everything went to pieces. I mean, nothing was working. In other words, they dumped me in the middle of it and said, fix it. It's your life, deal with it. But they will help you if you ask while you're dealing with it. You have to learn. You had to in the second grade. Unfortunately, we're still in the second grade. I love this one. I think I got troubles. God just put me on hold. This is what happens when you won't deal with your subconscious mind on getting rid of the blocks inside it that are preventing your prayers from working. We'll go into that a lot more this afternoon on my workshop clinic on how to deal with all of this. I'm putting in a commercial, of course. It's a good time for it. Sign-up sheets in the back, or just stay. A lot of times we wait to get information from our high self or something, and life or the whole thing hits us in the back of the head and we think we're enlightened. Enlightenment is nothing more than knowing you're not enlightened. Once you know you're not enlightened, you're enlightened. Yeah. I'm going to let that one speak for itself. If the good Lord had wanted me to work my tailbone off, he would have made it detachable. And I can vouch for that. When the crew is fighting, nobody is piloting. When you have a fight with your subconscious mind, you're not even on autopilot. I mean, the ship of the life is rudderless. And look out for reefs, because you're going to hit them. You have to make a friend with your subconscious. Because if you don't, you'll have the worst enemy in the world. I can guarantee you that. Here is on relationships. I had to learn this one the hard way. Why don't you get to know the other person instead of trying to make them over into what you think they ought to be? When I figured this out for myself, I made out a list of all of the things that I do. See, you can't image love. It's a physical impossibility because love is not an emotion. Love is a state of being. So the only thing that you can image is what you do to show being loving. And you can image what it is you want the other person to do in order for you to feel being loved. So, I made a list of all of the things I do to show being loving, and then I made a list of all of the things I wanted the other person to do in order for me to feel being loved. And then I started looking for that person that wanted what I did in order for her to feel being loved. Well, I found her. We had 34 lovely years together. We had a great time. And then she passed away, and then she passed me on to my new partner. Really. Oh, by the way, if you'll tell me what I did right in those 34 years, I'll do it again.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And now we got time for questions. This has been a lot of fun, and I've really enjoyed it. So let's have some questions.
So what happens when I guess you forget when you do it right?
Well, if you're doing it right, quite frequently you don't realize that you're doing it right. It's just so natural. So what you have to do is quit projecting into the other person what you think they want.
Oh boy, that's a hard one.
Yes, and you have a question, yes.
Yeah, the one thing I didn't really get, can you expand more on the, was it abdicating?
Abdicated responsibilities.
Yeah, that's a new one for me.
Okay. It's the fact that when a situation comes up, and instead of dealing with it, you ignore it. You put it aside. You tell God to deal with it. God isn't going to deal with it. God's going to tell you how to deal with it. God gave you the strength to deal with it. But you have to deal with the situations you've created in your life. God ain't doing it to you. God is not creating those situations. God is creating your future according to the desires you have. If you don't have conscious desires and a clear path in the subconscious to create the future you want, the high self or the spirit guide will come in while you're asleep and pull all of your desires out and create your future based on this combination of fears and desires. So when you deal with the fears, then the desires become easier. It is that simple, but it ain't easy. Yes, ZJ, yes.
I find myself very emotional at times. Now, when I'm emotional, I'm not focusing on what happened to me in the past. I'm just being emotional.
What you're doing is you're being the past.
Ah,
If you can consciously step aside from that emotion, see, there's three, well, actually there's four parts of us. There's the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the superconscious or the high self. But there's a fourth part. There's the combination, the ultimate. All three of you together are one being, and that is a being that is capable of standing aside and watching all of this. It's called the watcher. And there are many times that you've experienced this, I'm sure. Once you get into a high emotional state, it's very difficult to step out. But if you can learn to do that, you'll quit making life-changing decisions under the impact of a deliberately powerful emotion, which is going to kick you in the tailbone, invariably. Okay, that's a good one. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. She had a question.
So, you know how when, like, if you're trying to think of a word, right? I'm like, I know this word, it's not coming to me, and you're like struggling, trying to think of that word, right? And then when you can't think of it consciously, so you set it aside. And then at some point later, after setting it aside, it suddenly pops into your
Yes, ma'am.
conscious mind, right? So that's kind of how I would consider when you're struggling with a situation, you're trying to figure out a solution, and your mind is spinning, and you just don't know what to do. That's when saying, like, okay, I'm going to give it up to God.
Yes.
Which isn't abdicating responsibility.
That's not abdicating responsibility. That's asking for advice.
Yeah, it's kind of like letting
Okay.
it go, right? And being open to inspiration.
Abdicated responsibilities to me is not following the advice you get on how to deal with
Oh,
it.
okay.
Does that make sense?
Or blaming somebody else.
Okay.
Or blaming somebody else for the situation.
Right.
CJ, you had a question?
Actually, I answered myself later on. When I'm meditating daily, or I put in practice meditation, I find I'm less emotional.
Of course. You know what your meditation is doing is going back and tamping down those situations, the triggers, I should call them. A trigger is a situation occurring in your life right now that is triggering some emotion from past experience. And that past experience is emotion is what we're trying to get rid of. That's what's blocking our prayer path. And the easiest way for me to do that is to get my pendulum out and ask for, when did this first occur? Why am I reacting this way? Put a picture in my mind of when this first occurred, and I will get a picture. And it's usually in about the third or second grade, sometimes a lot earlier. Then I can deal with the emotion associated with that memory. I keep the memory for the lesson I learned, which is usually, don't do that. Yeah, Joe.
You know, when I decided to get married again after 18 years of partying, I was making a vision board about getting a new husband. And I had a picture of a happy couple on my vision board, and I sat and I stared at it, and the idea came to my head, you can't have that. And I thought, wait a minute, if all things are possible, why can't I have that? And then the abuse or the rejection, the difficulties all came up, and I was able to put those aside and go forward. So on December 8th, Keith and I are actually going to do a workshop on how to find your perfect mate forever, or a date, or a companion, or a friend. And we'll be sharing some of the ideas that we used to find somebody. On November 18th, next Sunday, it's 30 years ago I met my husband at dance. So, and we're still together and still happy 98% of the time.
Yes, Alan.
No, I was gonna say time for one more question.
Yes, time for one more question. Corky, you had something you were going to say. It's running around on the floor. If we see it, we'll
Well,
tell you.
I have a feeling that it's gonna be answered, hopefully in the workshop, but
Yes.
it's so, how do you take those bricks out of the wall?
Yes, that's exactly what's going to be covered in the clinic this afternoon. Okay, Ann, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now it's time for our giving, and